Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Pedalshift Project. The Pedalshift Project is a series of conversations, thoughts, and experiments around the bike touring lifestyle. From tips and tricks to ideas on how to ride your ride, let's shrink the world by bike. Show notes and more are available at pedalshift.net/205, and you can email the show at pedalshift@pedalshift.net or call the voicemail hotline 202-930-1109 and check Pedalshift out on all the socials as well. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 205th edition of the Pedalshift Project. My name's Tim Mooney. Thanks so much for joining. On this edition, we are going into the time machine once again and rediscovering, rewriting my Erie Canal Trail ride of 2015 with 2020 perspective. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. But first off, some news in housekeeping, because the world still keeps spinning on its axis, even if we're not out there enjoying quite as much bike travel as we would like. Friends of the show, Annalisa van den Burgh and Erik Dowds, are back from their adventure in India just under the wire before Gestures Broadly all this went down. And I'm hoping to get them on the show this spring to chat all about it. That's going to be really fun to hear about. In the interim, they are running a contest over at milesofportraits.com/read-and-ride. And they're giving away all sorts of things, books, films, cycling gear, and much more to help keep everybody inspired in our less bike travel-y state. So go check that out, and hopefully we'll get them on the show very soon. Also, more friends of the show sightings on the Instas and then on the socials and on the FaceTimes. I chatted with Brock Dittus of the Sprocket Podcast, producer emeritus of the Sprocket Podcast this week. I think we're looking at a SprocketShift Happy Hour coming very soon. Details, of course, will be available at pedalshift.net/happy hour and also in the Pedalshift newsletter. As I sit here right now, I was supposed to be flying out to Portland, Oregon for what would have been, let's see, a Dandy Warhol show, and almost assuredly some kind of a tour of the Oregon coast. So obviously that's not happening, but you know what? Oregon's going to be there. I talk to people in Oregon all the time, and they assure me it is still there and waiting for me to be bicycling later on when all of this gets in the rear view. Well, let's talk about riding, huh? Shall we? Let's jump right into part 2 of our revisitation of riding the Erie Canal Trail. As a quick reminder, since bike touring adventures are on pause, very much so, but the desire to be on them isn't, the Pedalshift Project is proud to dust off this never-released tour journal of the past from 2015. For the next several weeks, still, we're going to be revisiting that 2015 tour of the trail that started it all for me, the Erie Canal Bike Trail. I talked a little bit about my history with it in part 1, so if you are brand new to the show or you missed episode 204, I would encourage you to backtrack, go check out episode 204 before you listen to this one. Now, as I did in that episode, I'm going to be popping in from time to time to give a little 2020 perspective on the ride. I'm going to be, and have been, as I've been going along editing this, I've been listening to some of this stuff for the first time in years. So in some ways, it's been like me riding it all over again. And at least one point in this particular episode, I'm here to tell you, I had completely forgotten about something, and it was, well, let's just put it this way. I had a good chuckle listening to it because it was fun to relive it. So I'm glad to bring it back to you. In part 2 today, this episode, we actually are going to get on the Erie Canal Trail itself, covering my ride from my hometown of Fairport, New York, once a Raider, always a Raider, winding through my college town of Syracuse, go Orange, over a couple of sultry western and central New York days. Hope you enjoy.
I've got an old mule and her name is Sal, 15 years on the Erie Canal. She's a good old worker and a good old pal.
It's Pedalshift Tour Journals Volume 3, Erie Canal, from Fairport, New York. It is day 2, technically, although this is the first day on the Erie Canal. Had a great ride into Rochester last night and then up into Webster. Got a little fast forward because I ran out of light and got a pickup from the parents, which was super helpful. What it could have made it really could have made it in the end, as it turned out, because the light was a little bit brighter in the kind of post-twilight, but rather than push it, decided to go for the ride, and that's fine, and it's hashtag not cheating as far as I'm concerned. And now I'm down here in Fairport, which is south, and I'm picking up the canal, and it is just a beautiful day, a little bit clouded over, which is helpful with the sun. It was a really, really direct kind of sun day in yesterday, and but it was fine. And you can hear in the background The train comes through town here. This is a pretty popular port back in the day here on the Erie Canal. And of course, as the name implies, it was a Fairport, hence the name. And so this is a town I grew up in, not far from here, kind of a stone's throw. I'll be going east, so I won't be going by some of the places where I really spent a lot of time at, but that's okay. I'm going to be enjoying the ride. I'm going to be going to an area that is just, let's see, I got to get my bearings right, north of Seneca Falls, New York. If you've heard of Seneca Falls, that is probably because it's very famous for the women's suffrage movement. It's where National Historic Park is for all of that. Susan B. Anthony and a lot of other very famous women who helped get the right to vote for women back in the early 20th century were really active in Seneca Falls, and that's why it's pretty famous there. So I'll be camping not far from there, hopefully at the lock. Depending on how quickly I can time this out, I'm hoping to maybe even be able to visit the National Historic Park. We'll see. I'm getting off a little bit later than I had intended, but we'll see. I would like to visit there someday. I certainly want to get there by bike if I can, but for right now, I'm just going to try to get the miles to get that direction. Should be a beautiful, great day going through the eastern part of Monroe County and then working the way that direction. And a lot of cool little towns I'll be going through. Leroy, I believe. And what you're hearing is the lift bridge actually going up. This is a very famous bridge. I'll get a picture of it in the lifted position because that is a big deal. It literally lifts straight up. I got a picture of it down, and in about 2 seconds, I will get it up. That is to let boat traffic through. It's unusual because, like I said, it lifts straight up. So I'll get a picture of that. That's kind of exciting. You don't get to see that as often. At least I don't time it right. So, hey, perfect for the podcast.
I'd mentioned the lift bridge on the last episode, but I think it's kind of fascinating. You know, it was one of those things that it was always told to us that it was a big deal for some reason, that it was like the only one in the world that was, I don't know, on a hill or it was at a weird angle or something like that. But it is kind of a unique looking structure. It's at a 32-degree angle, and there are no right angles in the bridge construction whatsoever. So it's kind of cool looking. So go check it out. I've got a link in the show notes to the Wikipedia page. Yes, it has its own Wikipedia page. One other little sidebar on all of that. Little did I know how big of a deal lift bridges would be in my life. So, of course, I grew up with one there in Fairport, right on the canal. Again, we're seeing if you're in the area. It's going to reopen later this year. Apparently, it's been closed. But when I moved to Portland, Oregon, there is a major lift bridge there as well. Those of you who are in Portland, you know all about it. It's the I-5 Interstate Bridge. That is the one that goes over the Columbia River and backs up traffic for miles and miles and miles whenever a big container cargo ship needs to get through, and they have to lift the bridge and literally stop traffic on I-5. I think it's the only lift bridge or any real stop of that kind of thing in any of the interstates all throughout the United States. Anyways, Lift Bridge Podcast. That's what we've turned into.
Hey, it's Pedalshift Tour Journals, Volume 3, Erie Canal, just outside of Fairport, New York. Thought I'd take the opportunity to tell a little story about kind of the parts of the Erie Canal that you don't hear about a lot. And I'm going to talk about, and if you're from the area, you'll know this term probably, scum jumping. What is scum jumping? Well, the Erie Canal, you'll see a lot of the pictures of it. It is not the cleanest body of water. It has almost an army green quality to it, and it is silty and dirty and kind of nasty. Often referring to the canal as sort of scummy, kind of an apropos thing. Jumping, well, there are a lot of bridges in the area, and they are directly over said scummy body of water. So what some brave souls would do, not me of course, because that would be wrong and illegal, would jump from a bridge into said body of water. The result, of course, would always be you'd be dirty and filthy and smell like canal, which is not ideal. The, I guess, urban legend was that somebody once scum jumped off of one of the local bridges in enter name of town here. It was always Fairport for me. And jumped through a dead cow's carcass floating in the canal. Again, urban legend, it probably never happened, but such things are the way they are. Scum jumping, that is part of Erie Canal lore.
I thought I would look up the urban legend that I just described there, the jumping through the dead cow, and I just Googled scum jumping Erie Canal, and shockingly, no references whatsoever, which I think is really strange. Maybe the term's gone away. Maybe it's one of these old man winter kind of terms that we only said back in the 70s and 80s. Maybe. I guess we'll see. But in any event, I can't find any reference to that very well-honed legend of jumping through the dead cow.
Outside of Macedon, New York. Ran into a guy named Jake just now. My microphone was a little too buried to be able to do a full interview, but I thought I'd recount what his ride is. I caught him going westbound. He is doing the entire length of the country and has a really cool ride story so far. Started at the easternmost point in Maine and worked his way through Massachusetts, and then didn't know about the Erie Canal towpath until about Western Mass, and then hooked up with it and has been having a really good ride so far. Spending a lot of time at Warm Showers, and has good things to say about the Warm Showers host in Rome, New York. So for the fans, go check that out. And he's working his way to Buffalo and then eventually see some family in Ohio. So Jake, tailwinds to you, sir. That's a great ride, and he's going to end up, let me complete the story then. If he started at the easternmost point of the continental U.S., he'll end up at the westernmost point in Washington State. So that's pretty cool. That's a great tour and a great ride. I have had just beautiful weather so far, which is going to be in contrast to tomorrow because apparently it's going to rain all day tomorrow. So I am going to enjoy the heck out of it. A lot of surprises so far on the ride from back home, just some work-related stuff that I've had to handle, but that's no problem and easy to do. That's one of the reasons why I rock the iPhone, and technology is it allows me the freedom to do a tour yet still be plugged in enough to work, to be able to handle things so that I can be away. That's kind of the nice aspect of my work situation. And I'll also be helping while my girlfriend's on this retreat. She's not going to be able to be as plugged in, so I'm going to be able to help her out as well. So even though I'm going to be out enjoying myself, my office will be the great outdoors in the Erie Canal towpath. So I'll be able to sort of multitask, and I don't mind doing that because it allows me the freedom to do things like this and still be working and having a nice balance with all of that. So that's great. Let's see, the other surprise, a very pleasant surprise, is that my cousin who lives in Seattle and his fiancée are visiting in Syracuse, which is about 90-ish miles to the east of where I'm at right now. I'll be continuing eastbound, and then tomorrow as they are leaving Syracuse in their rental car, we'll sort of figure out a town to meet in, hopefully, and be able to have an unanticipated but very welcome visit. So that'll be really cool. And sort of random, too. We'll probably be in some random trailside town, maybe in Baldwinsville or something like that, which is just outside of the city of Syracuse. So we'll see how that all goes, and that'll be fun. So, yeah, real fun trip so far. I have to say, as tours go, this is really easy riding. I don't know if you can pick up the sounds around me as well on this particular microphone, but this is, as anticipated, the surface of this towpath is very much like the Great Allegheny Passage. Very flat, very few ruts, very nice smooth riding, maybe a notch below asphalt. There are paved sections that I've run into so far, and there will be some road work as well. Also, the other nice little benefit you get from time to time over my right shoulder, because as I'm traveling this direction, I've got the canal on my right, the sounds of boats. The canal is largely for recreational purposes at this point, if not exclusively, and getting to see some boats. Met a nice couple in Fairport who had rented a boat for 4 days, and it was a classic sort of flat canal boat that can get under all the bridges without having to have the bridges go up, which is a real help for quick travel on the canal. And they're having a blast, and they're going west towards Buffalo. In Newark, I think I'm pronouncing that properly, New York. We all know that we Western New Yorkers like to pronounce things wackily, and this is a town I'm actually not very familiar with, so I believe it's Newark, New York. Beautiful little town, had a lunch stop, and the place was very understaffed, and the poor waitress was having a no good, very bad day, so I tried to be the one good customer that she had. But now I'm back on this very sun-soaked road, and longtime listeners know I am deactivated by direct sunlight, generally speaking. but I'm making do. It's still relatively okay temperature-wise. This is one of the first of many, I don't want to call them detours, but portions of the Erie Canal towpath route that is actually not on a towpath. It is on a road with a very wide bike lane, and it was only temporary as I'm about to get back on what appears to be a paved portion of the towpath route. One of the things that I've been noticing, and I took pictures of earlier, and of course follow along at Pedalshift on all the social media for all these photos, is many of the old bridges through some of these towns have been decommissioned for vehicle use because in many instances I know of, they are actually too weakened by age to actually continue to hold combustion vehicles. So what they are doing now is they are starting to allow them and keep them rather than reconstruct them. They're keeping them for pedestrian use and for bicycle use, and that's kind of nice. I am passing by Lock 28B on my way. I think I'm going to be, I think it's Lock 26. I think I'm 2 more locks down the canal. The beautiful part about the Erie Canal towpath is that the New York Canal Commission, I believe that's what it's called, allows generally for camping on the properties immediately surrounding the locks, which is really, really fabulous. Many of the towns also have setups for boaters, so I wouldn't be surprised if they also would allow for folks who are biking to do it as well. Of course, that's your mileage may vary, and it depends on the town and depends on the situation. I don't think in Fairport you would be able to get away with that, but others definitely. So, great start to the ride so far. Really enjoying it. Even did the rare trick of having a beer midday. That is rare for me because I tend to not cycle too well after even one beer. But I was feeling it, and it was good. And so a lot of the paved portions roll real fast. The surface otherwise has been fantastic. Really good. Weather update for tomorrow. It doesn't look like tomorrow may be as much of a sure bet for rain as originally thought. Looks like that tomorrow may be all right. Tuesday might be another question, but we're sort of in that space with these types of situations where it may not be as a surefire bet as we know. So that's where we're at. I'm interestingly back on a road again. That was not a very long stretch of towpath, but following the canal, so I know I'm going in the right direction. So lots of more interesting sights to come. Another about 20 miles or so today, so I'm sure I'll check in at least one more time. From the beautiful town of Clyde, New York. Yes, so it is effing hot. It's not even that hot, but I just needed a very extended break, which was good because there was an outlet I could recharge a little bit, my phone as well as me. But boy, oh boy, I was just really my internal body temperature was very hot. So a chocolate shake and a nice long sit has done me wonders. I am not big, as many of you know, on kind of pushing and suffering through any kind of a tour. It's just not interesting to me. It's not fun. This is not meant to be punishment. This is meant to be fun. And that's sort of my mantra with going on these rides. Now, what I've discovered is that a good major portion of this ride for the rest of today and even for the beginning of tomorrow is actually all by road. I sort of went into this ride not spending a lot of time doing a lot of advanced research, which is against my normal type of point of view. And 3/4 of the canal path has been completed. This is a large portion of it that has not been. So a lot of time spent on New York Route 31, which is interesting because that is a road that I lived just off of when I was in Fairport, New York. So this portion of Route 31, I will get to know. Very nicely shouldered, very nice bike route. It's the official bike route 5 for New York State. So it is all good. I'm quite happy with that. I have about 10 more miles to go. Now that I am recharged and the internal body temperature has dropped a little bit, I am fully hydrated and have a nice bit of sugar in me, so I think all will be good. This is actually the one part where I break off of Route 31, at least according to one of the suggested routes, both for the bike map and by Google Maps. So I'm going to take that and cross over the canal and sort of wind my way down towards Mays Point, which is where I'm going to end my evening and my day. There's probably not another town that I'll be going through, so this may be it for town. So I think I have plenty of water. There may be water there at the lock, but we'll see. Potentially not. So that's it from Clyde, New York, a newly rejuvenated me.
So I mentioned New York State Bike Route 5, which is, of course, the Erie Canal Trail / towpath. But New York State is an incredible set of bike routes, and they're apparently, as time goes on, supposed to be making them better and better and better. Route 5 goes right through western, central, and then eastern New York. There's a couple of other ones of note that you may want to take a look at if you're considering bicycling New York State. Route 11 you can catch off of in Syracuse. I passed by there in this particular episode. I don't think I mentioned it, but that goes north-south and winds its way up all the way to the most northeastern corner of New York State along Lake Champlain, where you can hook up with Route 9, which goes all the way down from that point, the Canadian border, all the way down to New York City, which is super cool. Hugs the Hudson River. That looks like a really good one. The southern tier features Route 17, which is also the route of the New York State Automobile Road as well. So that's kind of interesting. So you could really pull together an incredible loop of the state, see some really interesting things, and really see everything that New York State has to offer, all of the different types of environments and whatnot. Also, Route 25 and 25A out through Long Island. So, if you ever, you could really spend an entire several months just cycling through New York State and see everything. Quite fascinating and interesting. And it looks kind of interesting as I'm sitting here right now. As I was wrapping up that day of riding, you're going to hear it from me here and not through the tour journal because the audio was really weird. There was something funky going on. Anyways, I ended up in a town called Tyre, Tyre, New York, which I'd never heard of. A lot of these towns I went through, I never literally heard of. It's kind of funny. And there was supposed to be a lock that I had access to, and I was really excited about camping there, because it had been a long, hot day of riding. And I got to a certain point along the road route there, and all of a sudden, the bridge that would have gotten me to that lock was out, closed. No bueno. Literally 20 feet away from that, though, was a sign showing the entrance to a commercial campground, which ended up working out really quite well for me because A, I was at the end of my day for sure. B, I wasn't really excited about looking for wild camping in that state of mind when it wasn't something I was looking for in the moment. And most importantly, I was so hot that having a nice, a cool shower at the end of the day to rinse off was really, really welcome. As it turned out, there were a couple of other bike tourists there, and we take it from the end of the poor sound quality of the tour journal to some good sound quality of that tour journal now.
So they are going all the way from Chicago to the Pacific, or excuse me, to the Atlantic, wrong way. So they're going roughly in the same direction that I'm going as well. So might end up having a chance to see them on multiple nights as well. So have more of a story from them later on. Until then, I'm going to jump in the shower. I need it after today, and maybe hydrate a little bit more, and then maybe go to bed at some point, maybe early. But this is a really beautiful part of the state. It's near the Montezuma National Wildlife Refuge. It's not terribly far from the city of Syracuse. I passed by this quite often when I went to school in Syracuse, so it's really beautiful, picturesque. Lots of wild birds. I'm sure you can hear a lot of them in the background as I talk here. So, from mosquito-infested Tyre, New York, that's day 2 in the books.
So that was it. That was the end of day 2, and that was a really good choice. Really, I was lucky, really, when all was said and done. Kind of fortunate that the campground existed there, and that was a great way to end the day. Mosquitoes, as I recall, were horrific. Horrific. Worst mosquitoes I think I've ever had any place camping in any context. It was really that bad. So getting up the next day, it was, as you'll hear in a moment, hot again. But I just wanted to throw a quick little bit of context for what's going to be coming in the next chapter. I make a reference to friend of the show, Nathan Clevenger. Now, if you've listened to some of the very older episodes, you know who Nathan is. Nathan, of course, was also featured in a recent Best Of. I met him before he was going to do a full cross-country bike ride. But what I will say is he was in the midst of his ride, and I make a quick reference to him. So that's who that is.
Day 3. Today's not so much about the Erie Canal. The Erie Canal towpath is not a complete route. The older sections and the more jacked up, beat up sections, actually, at least along the sides of it, are not trailed up. So the old towpath is gone. There is an intention to rebuild it, but between here, where I'm at right now in Tyre, New York, and Port Byron, New York, it is all road work. And then there is a section of trail that's back again, the same good kind of stone dust surface that I was speaking of so favorably of yesterday. That is from Port Byron to Weedsport. Yes, there is a town called Weedsport. Enter joke here. And then it's all road all the way through Syracuse. My intention is to do 50 miles today and end up at Green Lakes State Park. I think I'm going to abandon the concept of wild camping for at least a couple of days. 2 reasons. One, today is going to be even hotter than it was yesterday. And leaving at 8:07 a.m. with at least a little cool air. The sun's just straight up out. Almost no clouds. So I think it's going to heat up a lot more quickly. Number 2, it does look like there might be some rain. If not today, potentially tonight. And I think that I'd prefer not to be wild camping with rain on the way. And I'm kind of hoping that the state park facility has some good amenities to sort of help me transition out of this pretty tricky situation, for me at least. I mean, there's a lot of you out there, I'm sure, who relish the concept of mid-80s and direct sun. Some of you may be wishing that it was all the way down to the mid-80s and direct sun. I know a friend of the show, Nathan Clevenger, right now, is, as I speak, his intention was to start at 3 a.m. in the morning, which is redundant, 3 a.m., and do some serious mileage in Wyoming, because the temperatures there are kind of in the upper 80s, low 90s, with some serious headwinds and whatnot. We all remember the Wyoming headwinds from past episodes. Oh, actually, no, that was from a different camping trip. Never mind. I've never talked about that on the podcast before. There's big-ass winds in Wyoming, if any of you have ever ridden that. All right, so I am intending on trying to get a fair number of miles in. I am going to stop at whatever the first town is. That might be as far as Port Byron, just because I'll need to get some breakfast in me. The mosquitoes at this campground. I am very happy that it was there. It was priced like an RV campground, not like a kind of, although there was a hiker-biker rate, it was still way more expensive than typical hiker-bikers, just because it was an RV campground. The amenities were so-so, but the worst part was the primitive camping, so-called, was right next to a pond that was basically a giant mosquito breeding ground. And the mosquitoes were just brutal, both last night and this morning. And I just couldn't stand being outside in it. I couldn't stand being at that campground for a moment more. So once I got out of the tent and they started swarming again, I just covered myself in DEET to try to give myself a few minutes worth of joy, well, at least practicality, to get the tent down. And luckily, got out of there with half a bar and some water down me. This was not a brew my own coffee outside kind of morning, just because of the situation with the mosquitoes. I just couldn't handle it. Not even an instant. So, not even an instant coffee, not even for an instant. All right, so with all of that, I'm going away from the busted bridge working my way back to, I believe it's going to be Route 31, and that's going to be taking me back east again. I'm currently going north, so I'll be going into the sun in a little bit, which should be joyful. And then I'll be crossing the Erie Canal on Route 31, and I'll be on the south bank of it for a while, and that'll get me into Port Byron, and then more road work to then the trail to Weedsport. So that'll be nice, and maybe get a little bit of shade in there as well. My cousin is in Syracuse, as it turns out, which is great. So I am hoping to get a meetup with him and his fiancée, Haley. And Rob, if you remember from last year, was the cousin who lives in Seattle, where I started the coastal tour last year, the Pacific Coast Tour. So it's kind of fun to be able to see him again on another tour. This time he's catching me mid-tour, so I'm probably not going to be as presentable, shall we say. Although I've been trying to keep the bike a little bit better looking. My instinct is to always, hang stuff on it to dry a lot, and I feel like I end up looking a little bit disheveled as a result. So this trip I'm trying to make it look a little bit more presentable. You can tell me in the comments when you look at the pictures later today. All right, rolling through some beautiful farmland. I'll get tons of pictures as we go along. It's Pedalshift Tour Journals Volume 3, Erie Canal, and I am back on the towpath in Port Byron. I was about 8 miles or so on Route 31, near Route 31. And it was really rolly and farmy and very cool. Super sunny day. Weather is going to be pretty hot, so I am going to try to nail out the miles as early as I possibly can. I do have that meeting set up with my cousin tentatively. I don't know where that's going to end up being. It may end up being on the Fayetteville side. It just depends on how quickly I can do this and what his plans are. It'd be kind of nice to do that at the end of the day rather than in the middle, because closer, every minute gets hotter and hotter through 5 o'clock, according to Dark Sky, which is my iOS weather app of choice. So that's what I recommend, actually, if you're an iOS user. There's some new features on it that I really dig. Number one is that you can set it so that it'll have a rain warning for where you are at, and I think it's within the next hour. And that can be really helpful for planning purposes. Now, I know many of you are good enough with being able to predict rain that you could just tell. I like to use a little technology to leverage that as well, especially for these afternoon pop-up thunderstorms that we tend to get in this part of the world. Okay, so yeah, towpath is the same surface as I mentioned earlier. It's that, they call it stone dust. It's very similar, if not identical, to the Gap. A little bit narrower trail than the Gap. I'd say it's about, maybe 4 feet wide, 5 feet wide. And plenty for 2 bikes to go through. More and more I'm thinking salmoning against the tour that is coming behind me would have been really tricky on trail widths like this. You just know that there'll be people who'll be riding side by side chatting, and I think that just would have gotten a little frustrating, probably for both sides. They would have to be moving, and I would have to be slowing down, waiting for people to move. So, good to be doing this direction, I think. And also, I'm sort of excited to see Syracuse again later today. I'll be going right through the city, and I'll probably gauge maybe a quick lunch during all that. I think I'm going to take a lot of short breaks rather than one long break on a day like this. It's important to get out of the sun when I can. Just a kind of side note to all of that, I am wearing my kind of full whites, I like to call it, my white arm sunshade, arm warmers. They're not really arm warmers, I guess I'll call them arm coolers. They've got a really good SPF protection level to them. And I'm also wearing a white sort of synthetic shirt just to reflect as much of that sun off of me as I can. But so far so good. It's still reasonably cool out. I don't think we're going to start to hit the 80s for a little bit. But in the sun, it is warm. I have been dropping a lot of water, so I'm trying to keep that in me. All right, so Port Byron to Weedsport. Weedsport, I know. That is the next destination, and then it'll be a lot of road work again through Syracuse, and then trail until I hit the state park. So, at Pedalshift, check out some of the pictures I'll be putting up. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Near Camillus, New York, another one of those tricky pronunciation towns here in central New York. Through a really interesting 1.5-mile stretch. Thank you, Google Maps, once again, for sending me on this very heavily grassed semi-shortcut. I should have stayed on 31. I would have had I known. But it was kind of a fascinating little route. It was just some very moist grass, and I just looked down, now that I'm back on the stone dust towpath now again. I look down and I have an incredibly clean chain. So it's probably not recommended to use wet grass over the course of a mile to clean your chain. But hey, I have a clean chain. Probably will need to lube it at lunch. But I thought that was kind of a fun little thing that I noticed. Kind of a fascinating portion of the route. Making good time. The towpath sections, the off-road portions, are partially shaded, which is kind of nice. So I'm managing to moderate the amount of sun exposure, and of course getting these miles in early is always helpful too. So really good morning so far, hoping to continue. I'm seeing rabbits and woodchucks and goldfinches. I've seen more goldfinches on this trip than I think I've ever seen maybe in my life. They are very populated in this area.
I think another really interesting takeaway from that section of the tour journal is just to revisit that Google Maps detour. I'm always amazed at how the algorithm for Google Maps will make strange choices. Now, it very clearly will take a route that takes you off of a road. And often that can be really interesting and cool, or sometimes, and I'll use Swamp Road in this trip as an example. That was kind of it was called Swamp Road, but it was not an actual vehicular road by any stretch of the imagination. This time, this section, the grass, the chain cleaning road, as maybe I should call it, was literally just this patch of grass that was an old right-of-way of some type, and it wasn't marked, nothing. And ultimately, when it all comes down to it, I would have been way better off, as I mentioned, staying on Route 31 there. It had a shoulder, it had it was basically the bike route. So I think that it's one of those things to serve as a reminder that sometimes Google Maps will save you time, save you effort, save you headaches of dealing with being in vehicular traffic areas, and sometimes you're better off sticking with the road route, and it's really going to depend. And if it's your first time in that area, well, you know what? You're going to have to just make a choice. That's why I've always recommended that you do the route as best as you can using Google Earth or just even Street View ahead of time, because that can often show you that, the road route is a better route. But the downside to that, of course, is that sometimes a Street View, at least, of course, wouldn't show that grassy route because they wouldn't send a car down that way. So you just don't know what the difference is. So, in planning, sometimes you can avoid things, but sometimes the trip is better off when you kind of make a mistake like that. I think it was this time. From Camillus, Erie Canal State Park. State Park? Nah, actually it might just be a local park. It's interesting. It's actually quasi everything. It's part of the National Park Service as well. I saw that you can get a Park Service stamp, so this may be a multi-tiered stop here. It is the real close to the exact halfway point between Albany and Buffalo using the old Erie Canal. Now, one thing that might have been a little confusing with the route today is how much road work I was doing and how much was on an area that's actually away from the current canal. So they've moved the canal on several occasions, and for most of the ride today, when I have been on the towpath, it has been on the old
quote-unquote abandoned Erie Canal. The canal was actually moved in, I want to say, several times, but most notably in the mid-20th century, maybe in the 40s, if I'm not mistaken. And actually, it was sort of renamed to the Barge Canal. So very often you would hear Barge Canal and Erie Canal interchangeably. But this is the old Erie Canal that I'm sitting in front of right now. I've sent a couple of pictures out on the social media sites as well, and it's been really great. The sun has been clouded over, which is really kind of nice. I'm taking a bit of an extended break because just the timing of things, it's better for me to wait here, and my cousin Rob and his fiance will be coming to say hello, which will be a lot of fun. Kind of an unexpected surprise because I didn't know they were going to be in the area, and frankly I could use a break. It's hot, not unreasonably so. Now that the sun is clouded over, I think things are going to be a little bit better, at least for me. The next bit, I've got 2 more miles on the trail, and then it's all road work through the western suburbs of Syracuse, through the city of Syracuse, and then into the eastern suburbs of Syracuse. I'll be going by the New York State Fairgrounds within a stone's throw. I don't know if I'll be within picture-taking range of it. Also, Hancock International Airport, I'll be nearby there. Of course, I'll be rolling through and nearby Syracuse University, which you may have heard of. Go Orange. I don't know if I'm going to go up the hill to get a shot up at the university. It's always nice to visit, but with the way these clouds are looking, and I'll have to look at the weather forecast, it may be that the rain that was not going to come is now coming again, so I'll have to check and see how weather is. I'll also have to gauge how I feel. Yesterday I was a little cooked. Today it's going to be a little bit warmer, so we'll have to see. This is a good extended break, so maybe I'll be able to do that. It's been really, really nice. This is a fantastic stopping point if you ever are doing the Erie Canal. Camillus Erie Canal Park is a good stopping point. Tons of historical stuff. Lots of good information. There's a small museum here. It's largely closed, but the woman who is the volunteer here actually let me in so that I could get cold water, which, bless her heart, that's all I have to say. Not much more to share about the ride. I've seen some interesting wildlife. Saw a snapper turtle that I'll be sharing a little bit later as well. Tried to do a video, not an interview this time. If you were following Volume 2, I did a lot of interviews of turtles, but this one didn't seem too happy about my presence, so I just took a picture and went. All right, so going to be going through the city of Syracuse in a little bit. I'll probably have some pictures of that, and we'll be wrapping up on the far side of the city. And Green Lake State Park is my ultimate destination. Looks like that's going to be no problem. That'll be a full 50 for the day.
So I ended up meeting my cousin there at the park near Camillus, and that was a really fun memory that I had. And of course, I had no pictures because I forget to take pictures when I do this, which is insane. I should take pictures when I meet up with people on bike tour. Next time, for sure.
From Syracuse, New York, it's Pedalshift Tour Journals, aka the Heat Index ride. I am taking a little bit of a break. This part of the ride has some very small hills in all other contexts, but at 87 degrees in direct sun, it is a slog, and I had the added bonus of going through some really industrial areas that were not very good for biking. Downtown Syracuse has a really nice bike lane. The rest of this city is a flaming piece of crap for biking. Sorry to throw that down. Sorry, Syracuse. It's just awful. And there is a lane of sorts, but it's just not well marked. Just not a very pleasant place to cycle. And this is the cycling route through it for the Canal Trail, which is kind of unfortunate. I think Syracuse could stand to do a little bit better. The bonus part, they may in fairness be getting ready for that tour that's behind me a couple of days. They were paving one area of the bike lane, but the way I didn't realize that, the way they had it coned off for traffic. And I'm coming down a hill, and as I'm going over the fresh asphalt, the guy's like, "Stop, blacktop." I'm like, "Sorry. I mean, there's a bike lane. You may want to let bikers know coming down a hill that they're not supposed to go over it." This is just me. I'm enjoying a fine cold beverage right now. I've got about 10 miles. I think that I will have a better attitude very shortly. I just needed a little bit of a break because this is hot. This is hot riding, and it's not my favorite. And I'm looking forward to campground tonight. It's at a state park 10 miles away, and I can feel that there's a breeze coming in. I do feel like that this is going to kind of chill out at some point. The evening will probably be cooler, which will be nice, and I'm just hoping that the mosquito situation is better tonight than it was last night. Tomorrow does look like we may be getting some rain in the afternoon, and I'll just have to deal with that. I would much rather be cycling through rain than this, so I'll take it. Later in the week should be better weather, so if I can just get through today, 10 more miles. 40 miles in, 10 to go, and that's about it. Syracuse, New York, wonderful city, not great for biking. That's all I'll say.
I have to say, man, that's the first time I've heard that a bit in years, and I had the complete flood of memories. I was at a gas station up this entirely ridiculously sized hill where I was having that drink, and I had completely blocked that out from my memory. I almost am tempted to pull out my Flaming Sword of Justice 8-bit music for that. If you've listened to the show for a very long time, you know what I'm talking about. But I think we'll just leave it at that. I understand that the city of Syracuse is doing a better job in terms of their bike infrastructure, and this, of course, was 5 years ago. So let's just hope that things are, well, a little bit better than what they were. Sidebar, I do remember that downhill stretch where I was going over the fresh asphalt, and it was as ridiculous as that. It was sort of like I'm going through and the guy's like, stop, don't, no. Good times. Anyways, moving on.
I am back on the Erie Canal. Well, the old one at least. The old Erie Canal State Park is the site of where I'm cycling right now. That was an awkward sentence. I apologize. English is my mother tongue. I'm about 25 minutes or so, give or take, from Green Lake State Park, which will be a welcome relief from this very, very hot day. I am looking forward to cooling down. I'm looking forward to relaxing, and I'm looking forward to a day of cycling tomorrow that is unlike today. I don't think that the rest of the week bodes to have the nearly 90s and high humidity that I just suffered through today. And also, I think I'll be more on water. I mean, just being, in occasional shade here on the trail and next to a water body, no, it's probably relatively warm. It's still cooler than hot pavement reflecting back at you, which is what I had through most of the city of Syracuse and the environs around it. So it's much better here on the trail. And I think that it's just an expectation thing. You've really got to be ready for what you're going to be tackling when it comes to this ride. That trip through Syracuse, I knew that it was going to be a lot of road work. I think on a more temperate day, it wouldn't have been as bad. But I'm really happy to be back more in kind of the quasi-wilderness, or at least sort of more natural environment than the industrial cityscape that I had before.
It's always interesting hearing the juxtaposition of me in a bad mood versus me in a better mood. I always tend to break out of them. Maybe you all know this, I don't. Because this is the first time I'm really listening to these in this kind of a context. So, I was in a much better mood once I got back on the trail.
From Green Lake State Park in, we'll call it Fayetteville, New York. It is a beautiful, beautiful early evening here. I have finally cooled down my internal body temperature a little bit. I'm camping amongst the RVs, which is usually not my favorite when I'm on a bike, although for those of you who know, I do actually, I guess I co-own? Well, actually, it's my girlfriend's RV. We have a little wee one that is a vintage RV, so I'm not anti-RV necessarily. I tend not to like to mix bikes and RV with my camping, although we do bring bikes, so maybe that's a complete lie. Okay, I would totally re-record this entire commentary based on what I just said, but you know what? It's live. Or quasi-live. I'm underneath this beautiful maple tree here, and the sun has been blocked nicely by these trees, and it's just much more comfortable, and this is going to be a nice night. I'm lounging in my hammock, which I am now officially glad that I brought, because it's just nice to be able to kind of stretch out and relax and not have to be seated for an extended period of time. It's been really nice to have this on the last couple of tours. I mentioned this on a past podcast, if I recall, and I think that, an ultralight hammock packs up to about the size of a softball. Add on a couple of tree straps because you don't want to damage trees with paracord, and you really have a nice option. And obviously it's a choice you have for weight, but I don't mind adding a little bit of weight and a little bit of bulk to what I'm carrying because it feels real good right now. Tomorrow, I think I'm going to be going past Rome. I don't know particularly how far I'll end up going. I would like to do another 50. Looks like, again, there's going to be some rain possibly tomorrow, so, who knows? I just know that 50 feels like the right amount for the next 3 days. And I'm also getting to the point where I'm going to be kind of half committed to making it to Albany. Maybe not after tomorrow, but certainly the next day, it's closer to get to Albany than it is to turn around and go back to Syracuse. I'm not sure if there are good transportation options elsewhere. Probably there are. Utica might be an option. But I do need to figure out a way to transport myself back that is faster than biking, because I will need to get back by Friday. Friday about 1 o'clock, it sounds like, to Batavia. So we'll have to figure that all out. But right now I'm just sort of enjoying the ride. I think today was a little bit more of a getting the miles in kind of a thing. I think it was probably one of the least picturesque parts of the ride in parts. But the morning started out great. Maybe you saw some of the pictures in the rolling farmland outside of Tyre, New York. And right now it's really nice here in this beautiful state park. Big hill to get up here to the campground. Well, at least it felt big. It probably won't feel so big tomorrow morning when I'm rolling down it. But at the end of this day, it felt a little much to go up to the top of this hill to get to the campsite. But hey, I'm here. It's all good. I'm going to be making some dinner. I'm glad I sort of randomly just picked up a box of mac and cheese the other day just to have, because both nights camping, I've not had real good access to food immediately before the parks, or the campsite last night and the park tonight. So I'm going to have to make sure that I always have a little something that I can do a meal at the end of the day. Something simple like a mac and cheese or anything like that. Just as a backup, you never know. I mean, I don't mind eating bars. That's what I did last night. But yeah, I think tonight I'll be happy to have something a little more, I don't know, substantive.
So listening to that last entry in the journal, I flipped through the photos from the trip, and that's actually been a lot of fun. I'm going to include a bunch of the photos, by the way, in the show notes. So go check that out at pedalshift.net/205. And the last photo from that day is me in the hammock with my feet up and my dirty ass socks, because they just got dusty and dirty all through the day. And I just remember how great it was to be in that park. I don't think I mentioned in this, but it was quite a climb to get up to the camping area. And it was just sort of like, oh, really? One more climb? But it was fine. I got through it. It was great. And then to have the hammock at the end of the day just made everything, made it great. And it was a beautiful setting, and it was a super way to end what was kind of a challenging day when all was said and done. But, that's kind of bike touring, isn't it? It throws challenges at you, and you overcome them. That's kind of life. Maybe it's a little bit of a metaphor for, what we're going through right now. And as always, we like to close out the show with a special shout out to the Pedalshift Society. Because of support from listeners like you, Pedalshift is a weekly bicycle touring podcast with a global community, expanding into live shows and covering new tours like the Kessel Run. If you like what you hear, you can support the show for $5, $2, or even $1 a month. And there's one-shot and annual options. If you're not into the small monthly thing, check it all out at pedalshift.net/society. On to the society. Kimberly Wilson, Caleb Jenkinson, Cameron Lean, Andrew McGregor, Michael Hart, Keith Nagel, Brock Dittus, Thomas Skadow, Marco Lowe, Terrence Manson, Harry Telgadis, Chris Barron, Mark Van Ram, Brad Hipwell, Stuart Buchan, Mr. T, Nathan Poulton, Stephen Dickerson, Vince LaGreco, Cody Florchinger, Tom Beninati, Greg Braithwaite, Sandy Pizzio, Jeff Muster, Seth Pollock, Joseph Quinn, Byron Patterson, Joachim Robber, Ray Jackson, Jeff Fry, Kenny Mikey, Lisa Hart, John Denkler, Steve Henkel, Miguel Quinones, Alejandro Aviles Reyes, Keith Spangler, Greg Towner, Dan Gebhardt, Jody Zeranin, Lucas Barwick, Michael Baker, Brian Bechtal, Reinhard Biggle, Greg Middlemas, Connie Moore, William Goffman, Brian Benton, Joan Churchill, Mike Bender, Rick Weinberg, Billy Crafton, Gary Matushak, Greg Latois Lopez, James Sloan, Jonathan Dillard, John Funk, Tom Bilch, Ronald Piroli, Dave Roll, Brian Hafner, Misha LeBlanc, Ari Messenger, David Grotke, Wally Estrella, Sue Reinert, John Letko, Stephen Granada, Philip Mueller, Robert Lackey, Dominic Carroll, Jackie McCulloch, John Hickman, Jack Smith, Carl Presso, and new to the Society, David Neves. And thanks to all past and anonymous members for making this show happen. Thank you for joining. You can find Pedalshift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedalshift Project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.